indeed. It's okay, we're barely going to see you no matter where you sit, the way this space is. Okay, I need this, I need this, I may need this. Don't want this.
It's a premium for those seats.
Yes, but there's a smaller it's a smaller premium than the ones in the back.
Now you see why I like sitting there. You get the leg room.
Shabbat Shalom, welcome. Our service this evening begins with the Yedid Nefesh, page 14 in Sidur Sim Shalom, and page 10 in Sidur Lev Shalem.
Yedid Nefesh av harachaman meshochaftach el ritzonach yavrut avtach kemayal yishtachabe el mul hadarach yerav lo yedidutach minofet tzuf vechol ta'am hador na'eh ziv ha'olam nafshi cholat ahavatach ana elna refana la beharot la noam zivach az titchazek v'titrapeh v'haitalach shivchat olam v'tikyemu rachamecha v'chusna al beno havach ki zakama nichsof lirot b'tiferet uzach ana eli machmad libi chushana ve'al titalam higalena ufros chaviv alai et sukat shelomach ta'ir eretz mikvodach nagila v'nismecha bach maher ahuv kivamoed v'choneni kimei olam yadadai-dai-dai-dai yadadai-dai-dai-dai yadadai-dai-dai-dai-dai yadadai-dai-dai yadadai-dai-dai-dai 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 yadadai-dai-dai yadadai-dai-dai-dai 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 Letzur yishenu nekad mafanav betada bizmirot narialo nekad mafanav betada bizmirot narialo ki el gadol Adonai umelech gadol al kol Elohim asher be'ado mechkerei haaretz v'to'afot harim lo asher be'ado mechkerei haaretz v'to'afot harim lo.
Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands formed the earth's deep. Mountain crests, too, are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come, then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai who formed us.
Arba'im shana kut bedor v'almoram to'e levavhem v'hem lo yadu derachai asher nishbati v'api im yivon el menuchati. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru miyom leyom yeshuato, sapru v'goyim kevodo, bechol ha'amim niflotav. Ki gadol Adonai, hulal me'od, norahu, al kol Elohim, yadai ki kol Elohei, ha'amim elilim, v'Adonai shamayim asa. Hod v'hadar lefanav, Oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho, Havu l'Adonai mishpechot amim, Havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, Havu l'Adonai kevod shemo, Se'u mincha, Uvo'u lechatzrotav, Yadai yishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, chilu mipanav kol haaretz, imru v'goyim Adonai malach, aftikon tevel bal timot, yadin amim b'meisharim, v'yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz. Yiram hayam umelo ya'alo sadai v'chol asher bo yadai az yiranenu kol atzei ya'ar lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz, yishpot tevel betzedek, ve'amim be'emunato. Yai-dai-dai-dai-dai, yai-dai-dai-dai-dai. Yai-dai-dai-dai, 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 yai-dai-dai-dai.
Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice. Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine, righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land, the earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the Master of all the earth. The heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Zion hears of it and it rejoices. The cities of Judah exult as you, Adonai, pass judgment. You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine. Light is sown for the righteous and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you pronounce the divine holy name.
Orzaru ala tzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Orzaru ala tzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kodsho.
Mizmor shir Adonai shechadash, ki niflo atasa. Zachar rahu kol hazeh, tishvat ne'enu. Hari l'nai mitzvah zamru l'Adonai
Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor v'kol zimra, b'chatzot rot v'kol shofar. Hariu lifnei hamelech Adonai, yiram hayam umlo, tevel v'yoshveva. Neharot yimcha uchaf yachad harim yeranenu. Lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz, yishpot tevel betzedek, ve'amim b'meisharim. Yiram hayam umlo, tevel v'yoshveva. Neharot imcha uchaf, yachad harim yeranenu.
Adonai reigns, nations tremble. The one enthroned amidst the Kruvim makes the world quake. Adonai is great in Zion, above all nations. They shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, awe-inspiring Holy One. A sovereign strength lies in the love of justice, and you forged the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly. Exalt Adonai our God, bow down before God, the Holy One.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu v'romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu v'romemu.
Please rise as able. We continue on page 20 in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 21 in Sidur Lev Shalem.
Mizmor leDavid, Havul Adonai ben Elim, Havul Adonai kavod va'oz, Havul Adonai kivod shemo, Hishtachavu Adonai behadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, Kol Adonai b'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei halvanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel Levanon vesiryon, kemo ven re'emim. Kol Adonai chotev lahavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, vayechesov ye'arot, uvechalo kulo merkavod, kulo omer kavod. Adonai lama buyashav, vayeshav Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
You may be seated as we continue with Lecha Dodi.
Lecha lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmi'anu el hameyuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad. L'shem ol tiferet v'liti la 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 lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor haberacha, merash mikedem nesucha. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila la 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 lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Mikdash melech ir melucha, kumitzei mitocha hafecha, rav lach shevet be'emek habacha, v'hu yachmol alaychem la 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 lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Hitna'ari me'afar kumi, livshi bigdei tifartechami, al yad ben ishai beit halachmi. Korva el nafshi ge'ala la 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 lecha dodi. Likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi. Likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri. Kiva orech kumi uri shir daberi. Kevod Adonai alayich nigla la 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 lecha dodi. Likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi. Likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela. Lo tevoshi velo tikalmi, ma tishtachachi umatehemi, bachyachesu aniye ami, venivneta ir alti la 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 lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Vehayulim shisa shosayich, verachaku kol mevalayich, yasis alayich Elohayich. Kim sos chatan al kala la 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 lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Yaminu smol tifrotzi, V'et Adonai ta'aritzi al yad ish ben partzi v'nismecha v'nagila la 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 lecha dodi likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uvetzala, toch emunei am segula. Boi chala la 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 lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi, likrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela.
Chaverim, you may be seated. Our service continues on page 23 in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 27 in Lev Shalem.
Mizmor shir, leyom haShabbat. Mizmor shir, leyom haShabbat. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulzamer l'shimcha elyon. Lehagid ba'boker chastecha, ve'emunatecha ba'leilot. Alei asor, ve'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor. Alei asor, ve'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor.
A psalm, the song of the day of Shabbat. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and sing to your name most high, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night. Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up. You gladdened me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age, they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming, Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw.
Tzadika tamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yizkeh shetulim beveit Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva deshenim verananim yiyu lehagid ki yashar Adonai Tzuri velo avlatabo.
Honor Mangaleve, Slavish Adonai Oz, Hitazah, Rati Gondavel, Nachon Kisakames,
Mikolot Maim, Maim Rabim Adirim, Mishpereyam, Adir Bamarom Adonai, Edotecha, Ne'emnu me'od, Levetcha Navat Kodesh, Adonai leorech yamim.
Chavirim, you may be seated. We'll pause, as always, at this point in our service to reflect, but this time not on a piece of our Torah portion. Rather, for the fourth year, this Shabbat has been designated by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society as Refugee Shabbat. And in fact, today we are seeing the largest population movements and displacements since the end of World War II. Just to give you a sense of the scope, there are now an estimated 84 million people who have been forcibly displaced due to persecution and violence. 26.6 million of those are refugees. The remainder are internally displaced within the borders of their own countries. Fully 85% are hosted in a variety of developing countries, largely due to the geography and the countries from which they are fleeing and the countries which are within conflict. Of the almost 27 million who are refugees, Turkey has taken in remarkably the most refugees, so almost 4 million. And 68% come from just 5 countries: Syria with almost 7 million, Venezuela 4 million, Afghanistan close to 3 million, South Sudan 2.3 million, and Myanmar 1.1 million. I haven't forgotten Ukraine, but when we first started preparing for Refugee Shabbat, that wasn't part of the equation. So if we were to add it, we would have to recognize that over 1 million Ukrainians have already fled to neighboring countries, and over 1 million more remain displaced within the country, approximately. It's hard to know. The number changes daily, hourly. Aid organizations estimate that by summer there will be some 4 million Ukrainians who have left the country seeking asylum somewhere else. The number of internally displaced is unpredictable. The one thing we know is that the refugees from Ukraine have overwhelmingly been greeted quite well. The stories that have come out are heartening in that they are a remarkable counterpoint to the tyranny, the evil, the inhumanity that is being perpetrated by President Putin and the Russian military. By contrast, we've seen scenes just on the other side of the Ukrainian border, in small towns in Poland, where people are greeted with warm blankets, warm drinks, and warm hearts. In the Jewish community in Poland, their planned refugee Shabbat has been canceled in order to allow them to devote more time to the actual need of the people who are streaming into their country. The Jewish community of Warsaw has been working with local Jewish organizations, Highest Europe, and leaders such as Chief Rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Michael Shudrick, to coordinate transportation and housing for the increasing number of displaced Ukrainians who are finding their way into Poland. Agnatia Koser-Smolin, who's the director of programming at the Jewish Community Center of Krakow, put it, "We are having Refugee Shabbat 24/7 and will for the foreseeable future." The reality is that it is not just within the Jewish community that we're seeing this incredible outpouring and embrace. Throughout the day, as I listened to the news, new little snippets, examples of incredible embrace. There were stories of people going to drop-off points and literally inviting strangers to come home with them. We have a guest room that used to be our son's. We'll find a room. We'll make a room. And they took strangers off a train and brought them home and committed to give them a roof and food and a safe place, knowing the horrors from which they had just come. The Torah teaches us, "Ke'ezrach mikem yeh lachem hager itchem." The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your own citizens. That catchphrase, that idea that they should be embedded, internalized, embraced, has found a remarkable resonance within the European Union and many of its countries, where the people who are flocking into safe countries in Europe are being told that they will be given for a year and possibly as many as 3 the rights of a citizen to have health care and education and get a job and provide for themselves when they are ready to do so. But the verse goes on even farther. It reminds our ancestors and us, "V'ahavta lo kamocha," you shall love that stranger as you love yourself, "Ki gerim heyitem," because you remember and know that you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. And you are expected to remember that historical experience, to know the weight and the heaviness of being the other, the stranger, and to embrace those who are experiencing it today. The Talmud, in reflecting on the command to love the stranger, asks the following question: Mipnei ma hizhira Torah b'shloshim b'sheish mikomot bager? Why did the Torah call our attention on 36 separate occasions with regard to the stranger, but only once does it say, Va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that you shall love your neighbor as yourself? In answering its own question, the Talmud recognizes that the command is to underscore the reality that the stranger, the other, needs our particular attention. It's easy to love and care for the ones that are like us, but we need to be reminded over and over again that that same care, concern, and compassion has to go to the other in our midst. And so, as we mark Refugee Shabbat this year and reflect on the refugees and the asylum seekers, we should recognize that they are really not other. They are as we once were. Sojourners in Egypt who knew what it was like to be welcomed and who knew what it was like to be oppressed. They are like us, Jews who ended up wandering from one place to another, sometimes welcomed, often marginalized. As we watch the parade of people trying to escape tyranny, I can't help but think back to the stories that my grandmother, Zichrona Livracha, would tell. My grandparents were married in 1921. Their wedding present collectively from their family was passage to Canada. It was in the wake of World War I and the Russian Revolution. When I was a kid, my grandmother would tell these incredible tales about hiding in the attic and sneaking out to find food, and she told them in a way that made them seem amusing, engaging. It was only later, as I grew up and learned a little of Jewish history, and I realized that those stories were embedded in years of war and revolution, that the hiding was not just a game, but survival. That their passage to Canada would ultimately save their lives, at least, or most especially in my grandfather's family, Zichrono Livracha, who would emerge from the cauldron of World War I and the Revolution only to be caught up in the maelstrom of the Shoah. So each of us in our own families has stories of coming from somewhere else, coming from a distance. If we were lucky, we had family that took us in, Landsmannschaft organizations that helped us get settled, and sometimes we had to rely on this kindness of others who welcomed the stranger, who saw in us not a burden, but an opportunity to do good, who saw in us the potential to be a benefit and a blessing to the society to which they were coming. And now it's time for us to repay those bills, to do what we can to help those in need, both the ones that we knew about before last week and the ones who are front and center in our minds and in our thoughts over the course of the last 10 days. You received from the congregation, and if you didn't, check our webpage, news that we are trying to gather a whole variety of items to be sent to the Ukraine to try to help those who are unable to go home for even the most basic necessities. And I invite you to join us tomorrow morning as we have a very special guest, Father Vaisel Dovgan of St. Nicholas Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Watervliet, who will talk very personally about himself, his family, and the reality of their lives today. So please join us, and even more, V'ahavta l'gercha kamocha. Embrace the stranger, even if it's from a great distance, and help to raise them up and make them know and help them to know that there are people who care deeply about them, even though we've never met them. Amen. Chavirim, I'll invite you to turn to page 28 in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 39b in Sidur Lev Shalem. Baruch Atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, you completed your work of creation on the seventh day, calling this day from one evening to the next the Holy Shabbat, and gave this day of rest in all its holiness to your people Israel. Creator of day and night, ruling light before darkness and darkness from light, making day pass and bringing on the evening, distinguishing day from night, Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Living and ever-present God, may your rule be with us forever and ever. Baruch Atah Adonai, who brings each evening's dusk.
Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, El Chai v'Kayam, Tamidim L'Chaleinu Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Ha'ma'ari v'aravim.
Amen.
Avat Olam Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Al Ken Adonai Eloheinu, B'shochveinu u'b'kumeinu, Nasiach b'chukecha, V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu v'orach yameinu, v'orach yameinu, uvahem negeh yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. Ve'avatcha tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch Atah Adonai.
Baruch Shema.
Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Amen. El Melech Ne'eman. Shema Yisrael. Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Echad.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
Sovereign of all creation, God Most High, your power is manifest in the destiny of peoples and nations. You delivered Israel from bondage in Egypt, for it is your will that we should be free. You have given us Shabbat to commemorate that freedom, to teach us that no one shall be master and no one a slave. Help us to break every shackle asunder, hastening the day when the strong will be just and the weak will no longer know fear. You, our Creator, are mindful of your handiwork. Your ordinances are all conceived in wisdom. You commanded us to cease from our labor that we may find joy and peace in Shabbat. For we were not made only to labor. We must rest and reflect that we may sense your presence. We thank you, our Creator, for the gift of Shabbat, your gift to Israel that blesses all of humanity. Our service continues on page 32 in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 44 in Sidur Lev Shalem, Umalchuto B'ratzon.
Umalchuto B'ratzon kiblu alehem, Moshe v'nei Yisrael v'cha'anu shira, v'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot osef eleh. Malchutcha ra'u v'necha bokeyam lifnei Moshe, Ze'eli anu v'yamru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar Kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo miad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
Amen. We read together, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, V'ha'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, V'taknenu be'etza tova milfanecha, V'hoshienu lama'an shmecha, V'hagein ba'adenu, V'haser me'alenu oyev, Dever v'cherev v'ra'av yagon, V'haser satan milfanenu me'acharenu, Uv'etzel knafecha tastirenu, Ki el shomrenu matzilenu ata, Ki el melech hanun v'rachum ata, Ushmor tzeitenu uvo'enu l'chaim u'l'shalom, Me'ata v'yad olam, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim.
Ushmor tzeitenu uvoenu, l'chaim u'l'shalom, me'ata ve'ad olam. Ufros aleinu sukat shalom echa, Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch Shmo.
Haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
Please rise as able, and the service continues with Vishamru.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
We remain standing and continue with the Amidah in private prayer. We remain standing as the service continues on page 47 in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 53 in Sidur Lev Shalem, Vayechulu.
Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam vayechal Elohim bayom hashvihi melachto asher asa vayishpot bayom hashvihi mikol melachto asher asa vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvihi vayikadesh oto ki vo shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot.
We turn forward in our Sidurim and continue with Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu kovrim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu noteh shamayim ve'oser haaretz, umoshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, ushchinatu zo, begovhei meromim, hu Eloheinu ein od, emet malkeinu efesulato, kakatu v'torato, v'yadata hayom v'hashevota elevavecha, ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, b'shamayim mimal, v'al haaretz mitachat ein od. Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, le'melech al kol ha'aretz, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. You may be seated on page 53 in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 62 in Lev Shalem. We continue with Yigdal. Yigdal Elohim chai ve'yishtabach, nimtza v'yenet el metziuto, echad v'yen yachid, keyichuto, ne'lam v'gam en sof le'achduto, en lo demota guf v'yeino guf, lo na'arach elav kedushato, kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra, rishon v'yen reshit le'reshito, hino adon olam v'chol notzar, yoreh gedulato malchuto, shefan nevuato netano el, anshe segulato v'tifarto, lo kam Israel kemoshe od navi, umabit et tmunato, Torah temet natan li'amoel, al yad nevi'on eman beito,
lo yachalif ha'el, velo yamir dato, leolamim lezulato, tzafev yodea, sitarenu, mabit l'sof davar bekadmato, gomel ish chesed kemifalo, noten l'rashara kerishato, yishlach l'ketz yamim meshi, yishlach l'ketz hayamim meshichenu, liftot mechakeket yeshuato, metim yechayael berov chasto, Baruch Adei Ad Shem Tehilato, Metim Yechayael, Berov Chasto. Baruch Adei Ad Shem Tehilato.
We rise as able for Kiddush.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Bovrei Peri HaGafen.
Amen.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'yavav uvratzon, hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikra'e kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'acharta, v'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'ahava uvratzon, hinchaltanu, Baruch Atah Adonai,
Baruch Baruch Shmo.
Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Yishar Kochech, and thank you to Jody Elligberg for leading us in davening this evening. Shabbat Shalom Vorach. Good Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbos.
More correct.
There was a hey that threw me off.
Hey,
Hey, what do we do?
we finish it, and it's easier to spell out.
Couldn't lift it.
It's like home, we share.
We actually do. Well, it actually comes from.
Oop.